This is the brief on AI Decoded. Think of this weekly show as your very own universal translator, taking all that intimidating tech speak and turning it into practical, everyday language for folks without a technical background. First, we need to look at who this is actually for, because their core mission is to make artificial intelligence finally click for non-technical users. Since we aren't all programmers, the show acts as a strict filter for information, which really makes you wonder, if AI systems are so profoundly complex, how accessible can they genuinely be for an absolute beginner? Well, second, we see how the two hosts answer that by aggressively filtering the noise, separating what's actually useful.
Usually when we talk about growing an independent business, we tend to picture a ladder.
Right. Yeah.
You climb rung by rung, you secure bigger clients, reach a wider audience. It's this very linear upward image.
It implies a sort of natural momentum, like you put in the work and you just automatically move upward.
Exactly. But when you actually look at the day-to-day reality for freelancers or consultants or really any small business owner, the ladder metaphor just completely falls apart.
Oh, absolutely.
It looks a lot more like a hamster wheel. You are sprinting at an absolute top speed, you're exhausted, but then at the end of the year, you look around and you're in the exact same place.
Doing the exact same amount of work for the exact same results.
Right. You're constantly hunting for new business just because the old business simply, slipped through the cracks.
It is the absolute definition of motion without progress. You just keep starting from scratch every single January.
Which brings us to today. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are on a mission for you. We're pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources, including a highly practical step-by-step guide on how to build a functional client database from scratch, plus a few deep dive articles on client retention psychology, and some really compelling notes on integrating AI into daily business operations. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's do it.
The core premise woven through all these sources is honestly a massive wake-up call. The real difference between professionals who build lasting, compounding businesses and those who are stuck on that hamster wheel. It isn't finding the perfect niche.
Right.
And it isn't, charging higher rates. It is simply having a reliable, low-friction system for tracking and following up with interested people.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, today's deep dive is for anyone who wants to just capture the value they're already creating.
Because there's already so much value there.
Exactly. Every single lead that goes quiet, every prospect you mentally flag to email back, but then forget about, that's wasted effort. So this is really about building a personal infrastructure that catches all those lost opportunities before they hit the ground.
Now, when we talk about building a client tracking system, or a CRM, I feel like the immediate instinct is to look at enterprise software.
Oh, sure. Big platforms.
Right. We all know the big names, but diving into these sources, I really suspect the biggest trap here isn't buying the wrong software. It's that evaluating the software becomes a procrastination tool in itself.
Oh, it's the overcomplication trap.
Yeah.
And it is completely fatal to momentum.
Yeah.
When independent professionals realize they have a tracking problem, they tend to spend, an entire week just evaluating these heavy, complex platforms.
Oh, yeah, they're comparing pricing tiers, sitting through those hour-long demo videos.
Exactly. Setting up trial accounts for platforms that have vastly more features than they will realistically use in the next 10 years.
And the result is just a massive setup friction. You get that little dopamine hit of feeling like, hey, I'm organizing my business, but you haven't actually organized anything.
Not a single thing.
It really reminds me of buying a $3,000 treadmill because you decided you want to get fit.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. You spend weeks researching the screen size, the incline motors, the shock absorption. You finally set it up in your spare room. And then 3 months later, it has become a very expensive coat rack.
Yep. You exhausted all your motivation on the purchase.
Exactly.
That is a perfect analogy. You basically bought the feeling of being organized. But the friction of learning the software, figuring out the custom fields, dealing with those constant upsell emails, it just kills your momentum entirely. You never actually enter a single client into the system.
Which brings us to the surprisingly simple solution in the guide, which is basically just doing push-ups in your living room.
Right.
Zero friction. You can start right now. Because the recommended tool is literally just Google Sheets.
Yeah, and the deliberate nature of that recommendation is really key here. Google Sheets has essentially zero setup friction.
Because everyone already has a Google account.
Exactly. You open a new spreadsheet, you type clients at the top, and you're building. It works on your phone, it syncs automatically, and there's no paywall locking you out of your own data.
Which is huge.
It is. For an independent practice that manages, say, up to 50 or 60 active relationships at a time, it is fully sufficient. The text really emphasizes that the effectiveness of a client tracking system is never in the sophistication of the software.
Right, the effectiveness is entirely in the habit of using it.
Exactly. The habit is everything.
But, a spreadsheet is only as good as its design. I mean, we've all created spreadsheets that quickly mutate into those digital junk drawers.
Oh, yeah, the endless columns.
Just endless columns of random information that we never, ever look at again. But the guide insists we need to keep this incredibly lean, like strictly 9 to 12 columns. And reading through the logic, it seems less about storing static data and more about setting up, well, psychological tripwires. You aren't just filing information away. You're setting up specific triggers that will remind future you exactly what to say and when to say it.
That is exactly the mechanism at play here. Every single column has to earn its place by answering a specific question you need to know just to trigger your next action.
Okay, so what actually goes into it?
Well, you start with the conversational name, so what you actually call them, not their weird legal entity name.
Right.
Then their phone number, and a column for their preferred contact channel.
I found that detail about the preferred contact channel particularly sharp because we all know people who text back within 3 minutes, right? But then they leave emails unread for a week. Or people who only do business via LinkedIn DMs.
Yeah.
When you need to reach someone quickly to close a deal, knowing their specific communication wavelength just removes all that guesswork and hesitation.
It respects their friction points. You're communicating with them in the exact environment where they already feel comfortable making decisions.
Makes total sense.
And from there, we move into the business metrics that actually protect your time and your sanity. So a column for source channel documents how they found you.
And tracking source channels seems kind of basic on the surface, but the psychological impact of seeing that data aggregate over time is huge.
How so?
Well, for instance, a freelancer might feel like they need to be posting on Instagram 3 times a day just because that's what everyone else is doing.
Right, the social media pressure.
Exactly. But if their spreadsheet shows that over a whole year, Instagram DMs yielded 20 leads but 0 actual sales, while personal referrals, which take longer to cultivate, closed at 90%. I mean, that completely rewires how they spend their week.
Oh, absolutely.
They can stop performing for social media and just start taking past clients out to coffee.
It replaces all that anxiety with objective strategy. And the same psychological relief comes from the first contact date column.
Oh, right. Because tracking that date anchors your expectations regarding the sales cycle. We all know the emotional roller coaster of freelancing.
It's brutal.
You pitch a massive project. 2 weeks go by with no response, and you just start spiraling. You assume they hated your proposal. You assume you're terrible at your job.
Right, the panic sets in.
Yeah.
But if your system shows you that historically your enterprise clients take an average of, say, 75 days to go from first contact to a signed contract, that panic just disappears.
You can just breathe.
Exactly. The data acts as an emotional anchor. You realize that a 2-week silence isn't a rejection. It's literally just the normal pacing of that specific market.
And that leads us to how we actually visualize the health of the business. The source material leans really heavily on a stage column, right?
Yes.
Categorizing people as lead, in progress, active, past, or dormant. And the strict rule here is that this column must be color-coded.
Mandatory color coding.
Which I imagine completely changes how you interact with the sheet. Like instead of reading names and manually calculating where everyone's at, you open the document and instantly see a heat map of your business health.
Yes, exactly.
A wash of green means you're at capacity, but a wash of yellow LEDs means, uh-oh, you need to start hustling.
It bypasses the analytical part of your brain and just gives you this instant visceral read on your pipeline. And then you pair that heat map with a specific service or interest column.
Okay, so not just a vague category.
Right, so rather than a generic tag like real estate, you tag them specifically as a first-time homebuyer looking for multifamily units.
Which brings up the ultimate differentiator in this whole system, because we talked about the clinical business data, sales cycles, source channels, pipeline stages.
Right.
But the guide is adamant that you also need a personal notes column to capture those deeply human elements. But I do have a question about that. How do you balance tracking that cold, hard business data with deeply human elements like family details without the system feeling kind of robotic or manipulative?
Well, what's fascinating here is that this single column is actually what separates the professionals who build lasting high-trust relationships from the ones who just manage cold transactions.
Okay.
This is where you record the things that matter to them as human beings. The fact that their daughter is starting college in the fall, that they prefer early morning calls because they manage a night shift, or even that they've been frustrated by a very specific operational problem for years.
So it's not manipulative, it's just paying attention. So when you reach out 3 months later, that tripwire goes off.
Exactly.
You aren't just sending a robotic, hey, checking in on that proposal email. You're saying, hope the college drop-off went well in Boston, wanted to loop back on our conversation. The spreadsheet itself doesn't have empathy, obviously, but human memory is incredibly fallible.
Highly fallible.
So the database doesn't replace your empathy. It really acts as an exoskeleton for it. It ensures that the genuine care you felt in that moment translates into a touch point 6 months down the line.
That is the perfect way to frame it. The system scales your ability to be attentive. Remembering those details and referencing them at the appropriate moment, that is what makes a client feel genuinely known, rather than just processed.
The architecture is incredibly smart. So we have our tripwire set up in our 9 to 12 columns. But looking at the sources on AI integration, it's clear that staring at a blank spreadsheet with perfect column headers is still pretty intimidating.
Oh, the blank page is always the hardest part.
A perfect structure is just an empty shell. So how do we break the blank page and actually get this thing running?
But the primary advice here is to avoid building the initial structure in a vacuum. You leverage AI, specifically a model like Claude, to contextualize the columns for your specific reality.
Okay.
Because a freelance graphic designer has a fundamentally different client journey than a commercial real estate agent.
Right. Totally different needs.
So you feed the AI your specific profession, your target market, your typical client journey, and the questions that keep you up at night regarding your pipeline.
You basically use the AI as an organizational architect to draw blueprints tailored to your specific workflow.
Exactly.
But once the structure is there, we hit the dreaded data entry phase.
Yes, the heavy lifting.
And the guide emphasizes a golden rule here. Do not wait for perfect data. But I kind of want to push back on that a bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because my inner perfectionist hates this. If I'm building a professional system, entering half a name and a vague date feels like I'm corrupting the database right out of the gate.
I get that.
Like if I only have a guy named Marcus's phone number but no email and no last name, wait, shouldn't I just wait to put him in until I have his full profile?
See, this raises a really important question about how we view data. The trap of perfectionism assumes that if you just wait, you will eventually gather the perfect data. But the reality of human cognition is data decay. Imperfect data safely captured in a system is infinitely more valuable than perfect data slowly evaporating from your short-term memory.
Wow, okay.
So the strategy is to just go through your recent emails, your texts, your DMs, and grab the last 10 to 15 people who expressed genuine interest. If you only have a phone number, put it in. If you can only approximate the date you met, just enter your best guess.
Because momentum beats perfection. I mean, if you wait for the full profile, Marcus just stays buried in your text message history.
Exactly.
He gets pushed down by newer texts from family and friends, and eventually he just disappears from your radar entirely. But by putting his partial information into the spreadsheet, he becomes visible. You can actually act on it.
Yes. The maintenance of this system relies on a very simple micro-habit. Every time you have a meaningful interaction with a potential or current client, you update their record before the end of the day.
Before you go to sleep.
Yep. You add a date, you write 2 sentences about what was discussed, and you specify the next action with a date. That discipline, just refusing to rely on your memory overnight, is what transforms a static spreadsheet into a living engine for your business.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. Because now that the system is built and it's populated with our imperfect data, we hit the real-world test.
The application phase.
Right. How does this database actually solve the daily friction-heavy parts of running a business? Because knowing I need to follow up with someone is very different from actually knowing what to say.
Oh, completely. And this is exactly where the integration of AI moves from being a structural tool to an ongoing communication engine.
Okay.
Once the database exists, the most time-consuming part of maintaining a follow-up practice isn't finding the time. It's the emotional labor of drafting the messages, finding the right tone, striking the balance between, eager and professional.
Let's use our guy Marcus as an example.
Sure.
Say, Marcus was super enthusiastic 3 weeks ago. We had a great chat. I logged him in the spreadsheet. But then he went totally quiet. He ghosted me. It happens all the time.
Usually, this is where business owners freeze up. When you sit down to email Marcus, you are bringing all your own emotional baggage into that draft.
Oh, yeah.
Your frustration that he ignored your last message, your fear of sounding desperate, and maybe your anxiety about hitting your revenue goals for the month.
Right.
And that is why those follow-up emails usually end up sounding so weirdly passive-aggressive or unnaturally breezy.
The emotional friction causes the delay, and the projection just ruins the tone.
Yes.
So instead of wrestling with that blank email draft, you feed Marcus's specific situation from your database directly to Claude. You detail his original hesitations, the exact history of your conversation, how long it's been since you last spoke, and what specific value you want to offer in this new message.
And then
You ask the AI to draft a message that is warm, specific, and professionally detached.
because the AI doesn't have an ego to bruise.
It doesn't feel rejected that Marcus didn't text back. It just synthesizes the context you provide and maps out a perfectly calibrated tone that removes your own emotional projection from the equation,
It gets you past the blank page.
giving you a draft you can tweak and send in 2 minutes instead of agonizing over it for 2 days. And we can use this exact same synthesis for call prep too, right?
Absolutely. Before an important call with a prospect, you describe the historical data you have on them to the AI. You ask it to identify potential concerns the client might raise based on their past behavior.
Okay.
You brainstorm questions to uncover their current needs and suggest what specific metrics or case studies you should have on hand. You aren't using the AI to write a rigid script. You're using it to walk into that meeting fully focused, having already anticipated the friction points.
Now, there is another part of the business where communication gets incredibly awkward,
Oh boy.
and where this AI synthesis is basically a lifesaver, and that is money.
Yep, the dreaded invoice follow-up.
Following up on unpaid invoices, it is this massive invisible problem for independent professionals. We do the work, we send the bill, and then we just wait.
Hoping they remember.
The psychological barrier to asking for money is immense because we just don't want to ruin a good relationship by sounding aggressive or impatient.
And the discomfort of doing it imprecisely makes the problem exponentially worse. Poorly worded payment requests, written in a moment of financial stress, they can genuinely damage long-term relationships.
Absolutely.
The solution the source material suggests starts by making the problem objectively visible in the database. You add financial columns, invoice date, invoice amount, payment status, and crucially, days outstanding.
And you color code them.
Yes.
Anything over 30 days overdue turns bright red. Suddenly, this vague, nagging anxiety about who owes you what becomes a visible, objective data point that just demands attention the second you open the heat map.
You can't ignore it.
But, I mean, even with it glowing red, I still have to send the text. I still have to be the bad guy asking for the check.
Well, that is where the AI acts as your emotional firewall. Writing a payment request that is professional without being cold, firm without being aggressive, and specific without being accusatory, that is a highly delicate skill.
It really is.
And doing it poorly under pressure is super common. By describing the situation to the AI, the client's personality, the amount, how many days it's been overdue, and the fact that you genuinely want to preserve the relationship, it generates a draft that removes the emotional friction entirely.
It's basically like hiring a highly diplomatic bodyguard.
That's exactly what it is.
It's this emotionally intelligent buffer that steps in to handle the awkward, hey, you owe me money conversation with total professionalism. You don't have to sit there sweating over the wording, wondering if you use too many exclamation points or if you sound too rigid.
Right.
It just removes the I'll figure out what to say later delay, which is exactly the delay that allows a late payment to turn into a permanently unpaid invoice.
The AI removes the friction of confrontation. And of course, the AI can also generate unambiguous invoice templates and payment term agreements from the very start.
Setting the tone early.
Exactly. When your terms are explicitly clear upfront, clients have no pretext for delaying payment. And your diplomatic bodyguard has a very clear policy to reference if they slip.
So what does this all mean for you? We started out looking at the hamster wheel of client acquisition, right? Searching for some grand strategy to build momentum. And we ended up with a free spreadsheet, a daily micro habit of updating messy data, and an AI acting as our emotional buffer for awkward conversations.
Yeah, if we synthesize the core mechanics of everything we've discussed today, infrastructure reduces friction.
Ugh.
A database, no matter how elegantly designed, does not magically generate relationships. Only genuine human interaction, empathy, and competence do that.
Right. Because a spreadsheet cannot care that a client's kid is struggling with their college transition, and an AI cannot genuinely celebrate a client's promotion. Only you can do that.
But the infrastructure scales your capacity for that human connection. It ensures that those vital follow-ups happen systematically, rather than relying on your increasingly overloaded memory.
Yeah.
It allows you to operate with drastically less friction at every stage of the client lifecycle, building a rock-solid reputation as someone who is organized, attentive, and highly worth referring.
It takes all that mental RAM you are wasting just trying to remember who to call and what you last talked about and frees it up so you can actually be fully present when you do get them on the phone. You are no longer managing the chaos, you are managing the relationship.
It is a profound shift in how you operate daily.
As we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We've spent all this time talking about how to capture the details of your conversations, how to build these psychological tripwires, and how to use AI to follow up without the emotional friction. But think about this. If you know you now have a trusted, frictionless system that perfectly captures every detail you hear, how might that change the way you listen in your very next conversation? Will you stop just nodding along to the casual chatter and start tuning into the exact tiny details that will make someone feel truly valued 6 months from now? Something to think about. Until next time.
This is The Brief on the AI Decoded podcast. AI Decoded is a weekly show that provides actionable tech advice, and today we are looking at their broadcasting footprint and upcoming programming. You know, keeping up with AI tools feels kind of like navigating this dense, totally unpredictable jungle, which is exactly why finding a reliable guide is absolutely crucial. First, where do you find that guide? Well, listeners can expect a new episode every single week, accessible across all major platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. So why